Welcome to Dating Deja Vu, the podcast where we talk about your pitfalls, your patterns, and your personal growth in modern dating. I'm your host, Christina Hathaway, marriage and family therapist and dating and relationship expert. And let's be real, if your love life is a pattern of the same people and the same problems over and over again, it might be deja vu, but it also might be you. So let's explore that together. Welcome, guys, to our second episode of Dating Deja Vu. I'm so excited to have you here as we are going to define, we're going to understand, and we're going to learn how to protect yourself from ghosting, breadcrumbing, and love bombing. So if you're someone who has talked to someone for a good amount of time and then poof, they were gone, or you were strung along with just enough hope to keep going, or a relationship started off with mad intensity and then boom, it crashed and burned, well, you are in the right place today. So I love how we've defined these three things in modern dating because, when I was dating, they didn't exist, at least the definition of them. So I want to go into the definition of each. And just to let you guys know, no, your girl still hasn't, I am doing it now, charged her iPad. I charged it. And then on my other podcast, I used it. And then, so we've got my trusty phone because I want to make sure that we stay organized, I'd love for, what are those things that they have on the news where you just read off your notes, but we're not there yet. So ghosting is defined as someone, literally having communication with someone and then poof, cutting it off, they are gone. This could look like, talking regularly. This could look like maybe going on a few dates. You could even go on multiple dates. You could even be in a full-blown relationship. And rather than have a conversation about why it's not working out, they don't want to proceed forward, what's going on, they literally stop talking to you. And this, again, has been happening since the dawn of mankind. However, I feel like in this day and age and in this, the younger generations, this is so common because of reasons we'll talk about here in a little bit. Now, for ghosting, sometimes it's so abrupt that it's just like, poof, they're gone. But also sometimes there's like this gradual decrease in communication. Now, for my girlies out there and we'll call you my voodoo gang, maybe not, my Deja crew. Oh, yes, our Deja crew. That's your names now. Anyone who listens to this. Be careful because I see a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies happening when you think someone's ghosting, when in all reality, they're just getting more comfortable with you. They don't feel like they have to show up all the time and they're getting busy with their lives. We all know that the constant communication can fizzle out. That doesn't mean it's ghosting per se. So we'll talk about that. Next, we have breadcrumbing. It's kind of like dangling the carrot of love, connection, relationship, and dangling it enough to keep you interested, but never building into something. And breadcrumbing, are sporadic texts, right? It's like having vague promises to meet up, maybe meeting up intermittently and not necessarily consistently, and having constant excuses to why you cannot do things, but making promises to do it again or not show up in that way again, or whatever that looks like. Breadcrumbing is really when someone learns you or they understand your insecurities and they're kind of playing and feeding off of those insecurities and playing with you based on those insecurities, getting whatever it is they need out of the relationship. So maybe they're like, you guys are hooking up and you really want to go on dates. And it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm totally going to take you out Thursday night. And then he has to work late again, or something came up again. But then when he wants to hook up with you, after the bar is on Friday, he's there, you're there in hopes that this time will be the time that he takes you out or courts you or whatever that looks like. I say courts you like people know what the fuck that means. Lastly, love bombing. At first, it feels like literally too good to be true. This is the one. They're showering you with affection, with gifts, with attention, with praise, only for it to take a dark turn and their true intentions surface. Now, love bombing is such a red flag. Too much, too fast, too much intensity, and eventual withdrawal is very controlling. However, love bombing doesn't necessarily, when I think of love bombing, I do connect it with someone who is more narcissistic. They want to make the relationship about themselves, even abusive and toxic. So we can still see love bombing happen just because people are very insecure and they think that that's how they need to show up. I talked about this on Groundhog's Day, where I talked about some of my clients who show up in this very positive and easygoing and sparkly state, when in all reality, that's not their reality all the time. And when I talk about reality on this podcast, we're talking about thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs. And no human is always good. We have, emotions, we have our own learned experience, the stories we tell in our head. And so oftentimes we will love bomb and it's basically like the honeymoon phase on steroids. And then it's too much, too soon. We are really playing with our boundary system and boom, it crashes and burns. So I want to talk about why these behaviors happen. So, as I mentioned, especially in this day and age and this generation, the ghosting era is very prevalent. And why that is most likely these individuals have not learned how to have conflict resolution, how to express themselves properly, how to even let someone down in a healthy way. There is something to be said of being honest with people. And for some people who are ghosters, you may be so concerned, though, so this is opposite of that, to hurt someone's feelings or for them to see you as negatively, then you'd just rather them not see you at all. And what happens here is there's this intense fear of confrontation and, more importantly, emotional immaturity. Emotional maturity is being able to say, hey, I know we spent some time together. I've been, thankful to get to know you. It just, for me, seems like, there are some differences that I know I won't be able to see past. It has nothing to do with you or nothing to do with me. I just know that I'm going to be moving on. I've had this conversation with men multiple times in my life, but mainly after I did my own healing process, because I would say to them, like, it was really great to get to know you. I just think that, there's a disconnect in what I'm looking for. Nothing against your character or your, I won't say looks, but nothing against you personally. It's just not a fit for me. And that was true for me because I was looking for my life partner. And there were things in certain relationships that, whether it was their schedule or even their interests, or maybe they had views that I didn't have, that doesn't mean they're bad. They're just not my person. Right. And in this, ghosting era, we're so afraid to have those hard conversations. So I want you to think about, if you're the ghoster out there, I want you to think about, why? What story do you make up about yourself, about having the hard conversations, about being honest with people instead of completely just leaving them high and dry? Because when that's happened to you, which it has happened to you, it doesn't feel good. And you sit there questioning yourself even more than if someone obviously tells you straight up. You question your worth, because not only do they not want to be with me, but they didn't have the decency or respect to have the conversation with me. So what's wrong with me? Right. And we want to avoid that. When we don't want to be with someone, again, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with us and what we're looking for. So I want you to think about, like, what is the story I tell myself? Like, am I too scared? I'm afraid I'm going to piss them off. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt their feelings. I don't do well with confrontation. I don't want to look like a bad guy or a bad girl. What is it? Next, with breadcrumbing, it's often driven by insecurity, right? And this kind of need for like constant validation without a real commitment. So if we think about someone who kind of strings people along, these are going to be emotionally unavailable individuals. And the emotionally unavailable individual has not learned how to express their wants and needs. They learn that relationships are without vulnerability, without real commitment, or they fear that they will be left, they will be abandoned. And so they want to have a connection because we are social beings. We thrive on love and connection. However, they're so fearful of exposing their true selves and or then being abandoned for that true selves that they never are able to commit emotionally. So in an effort to get their needs met, they'll string you along and make those commitments, but then have excuses for not doing that. And that stringing along maybe gets their sexual desire, filled. They have some sort of companionship because you're there answering those texts and meeting up when they actually do want to meet up and having sex with them when they want to have sex. But that's it. That's for their need. They don't want to know about your emotional needs. And if they do, they'll make some sort of false promise to how they're going to help manage that or commit to that. Or if they're doing something wrong, they'll make false promises about changing just to give you hope. And so for the person breadcrumbing, same question is like, what story do you make up about commitment? What does commitment feel and look like in your head? Is it overwhelming? Do you feel like you're suffocating? Does commitment feel fearful that you'll be left alone? Does commitment feel like you're going to expose yourself? Right. And that's not to say there's a difference between breadcrumbing and someone straight up saying, look, I just want to have a casual sex, which no one's saying it directly, but like, I just want a casual relationship. This is hookup culture, right? We've been hooking up forever, but I'm just looking to have sex with someone. And that is not dating. That is not, talking all the time. I simply just want to hook up. That is going to be different if both parties agree, then we're agreeing on those terms and we should not be acting outside of those terms. But if we're not having that conversation and we're just, breadcrumbing along the way, we don't have clear guidelines to what is and what is not, that can be really harmful to you because again, you're working from this place of fear of abandonment, fear of exposure of self, and obviously to the person on the other end, because it does not feel good. They're not going to feel good enough for you. They're going to think they're only as good as what they can provide you, and their needs will not be met. So that is breadcrumbing. Love bombing is an emotional tactic. It's a manipulation tactic and often used, as I mentioned, with people with narcissistic tendencies. What love bombing does is create a power imbalance, meaning that this person will kind of hook you emotionally only to manipulate that later down the line. Now, as I mentioned, we can love bomb and not necessarily be that manipulative person. There are, people who live in fairy tales, happily ever after land, and they think that relationships need to be super intense, that it's too good to be true, love at first sight, all those things. And so both partners will kind of push, right? They will just have this intensity from the get-go where there's no boundaries. That's probably just as common as the other, which is one person becomes super into the other. They're showing up all of the time. They're giving all of the praise. I think about one of my clients, like this guy would tell her, "You're my perfect girl," weeks in. And I told her, I was like, be careful with that. Because number one, you're not perfect. And number two, how the fuck is he supposed to know what a perfect girl is a couple weeks into talking to somebody? When you're getting that type of feedback, it is a manipulative tactic to get you, right? Whether it comes from the person who lives in fairy tale la la land or that narcissistic person or that controlling toxic person who is going to use that against you. They want you, they're going to feed into your insecurities and say, look, there are no insecurities here. I love you. You're perfect here. Look at all this time and attention I spent on you. Oh, let me buy you gifts. Let me take you out to nice places. And then boom, then it becomes controlling. Now we're saying who we can and cannot talk to, how we can and cannot dress, what we can and cannot do. And that is where abusive relationships can stem out of. Now, again, for the fairy tale land, that usually just ends up in just crashing and burning, where, again, we don't have boundaries around what we're sharing with each other, around sharing our bodies with each other, around how much time we spend together. There is a moderate way to open up, to create intensity, to create vulnerability, to create compatibility and chemistry in a relationship. And what I mean by moderate, it's kind of like letting an air out of a balloon slowly, rather than what love bombing is like blowing up a balloon and then boom, letting it go. It's like all over the place. And then boom, that shit's flat on the ground. So throughout this podcast, you're going to learn how to create those boundaries. And we'll talk about that a bit today. So hopefully that helps break down kind of where these things come from. And then the impact on you for ghosting is feeling rejected, of course, doubting yourself in a relationship, doubting your worth, right? And simply just being confused, like what happened? Now, a lot of you will say, well, I need to talk to that person because I need closure. I'm going to talk about closure for a second. Closure happens with you. You're the person who creates closure in your mind. It doesn't matter what someone else says or does. I've had people have the closure talk with someone 10 times, not even joking. Like, oh, I just need to talk to them again. Or, oh, we just need to have that conversation again. No, you need to create the closure in yourself and say, this is not my person. No matter how much time I spent on them, I've learned things about myself. This is exactly where I need to be in this process of finding my right partner. And they are not it. And we create closure through that. And also, this has nothing to do with my worth. Forgot that part. So there's a lot of confusion over like what happened, which of course, if we are already insecure, we're going to make that about something defective in us. Breadcrumbing creates a lot of hope and disappointment at the same time. So you begin to think relationships are kind of all or nothing, right? Where they're all in or we're not getting anything at all. And that becomes very familiar to you, right? I have these awesome nights where we're hooking up. I mean, I've been in that position where I had these amazing moments with a person or weekends even where we're having fun, we're connecting, we're doing stuff together. And then the weekdays come and that person is gone, or the next weekend comes and they're, not talking to me and they'll say, oh, we're going to hang out this other weekend. So then you have that hope and then the disappointment comes. And for me, luckily during that time I was again in my healing process, but I know normally that would make me feel like, again, am I not good enough? Right? It affects your self-esteem because you spend this time with me and we're doing things that feel like that moderate progression towards a relationship, but then nothing. And then because I enjoyed that moment of time where we were doing the things, I'm almost looking for that hit again. So I stay connected and I get strung along. So again, that could be such an impact on the self-esteem. And then love bombing obviously has very high highs and very low lows and keeps you questioning your own judgment and reality. I bet for a lot of you, love bombing has felt off. Now I'm going to share a story with you and we're going to call it Corey. I think that was his name. So I was in a serious relationship for 3 years, broke up with that person, and went on dating apps for the first time since then, because the guy I was dating, I want to say we were like 2008 to 2011, maybe. And so we broke up and I got on dating apps when they just kind of came out. So I don't remember what apps. I think it was like Plenty of Fish or some shit like that. And I met this guy, and he was super charismatic. He was very like swaggy. He just was very successful. He had a nice home, a nice car. He dressed nice. He could dance good, like all of the things that I thought I wanted. And it started hot. I mean, literally the first date, I went to his house, you guys, like what the fuck? And we sat, I don't remember if he made, no, we went and got dinner, went back, saw his house, the whole thing. And then was, I want to see you again, right? And then was, I want to see you again. Oh, and then I have this thing with my friends this weekend. So come over this weekend. Oh, you should stay the night. And I remember very clearly being like, I don't want to hook up. Like, we just met. Of course we hooked up. And I started feeling some sort of way. I started to question my reality, because what ended up happening was, number one, I worked outside of these boundaries that I set for myself. So that's an issue. But number two, I began getting jealous because I would notice that he was still on the dating apps. Now, historically, I've not been a jealous human, other than when I thought guys wanted to date my friends, which was when I was much younger. However, in my 30s, I kind of grew out of that and didn't really like, I wasn't the girl like, why are you looking at her? And I would ask him like, hey, we're spending all this time together. I've been to your house, like we're making plans for, the future weeks. I'm just curious to why you're on these apps. And it happened over and over again. And I would react to it over and over again. And I felt crazy. Like I started acting crazy. And that, my dears, was because I knew the intensity was not right, but I was avoiding facing that. And so it showed up in another way, which was me kind of acting outside of my character and my values. I do trust people, and I don't micromanage people, right? But I was definitely micromanaging it. And then of course the relationship ended pretty quickly. Like I think it was like a month. I mean, this guy, we spent all this time and then boom, it was gone. But also I was questioning a lot of the things. And the reason why was because I felt not comfortable. I felt uncomfortable in this kind of crazy intensity up front and lack of boundaries, but I wasn't paying attention to that. So then it showed up for me in different ways. So, all right. So how do we protect ourselves from these things? Now, with ghosting, like I had mentioned, for some of you, you're like, well, there's a difference between this gradual decrease in communication up front. We all show up in our best way. And for some of you, that means communicating in a way that's not normal for your normal day-to-day. So I think we just start there, guys. Like, we need to start communicating with someone we're interested in, like we would communicate with them once we are in a committed relationship with them. So what I mean by that is, if you are someone who works all day and you're not on your phone all day, then start there. Start acting in that way, because that's going to create a lot less of what I'm about to talk about. So for some of you, though, you'll be texting all day long, and people get into the habit of like, well, he texts me every day and says good morning, and he texts me every day at lunch. And they start almost like writing down like when you text them. And if you don't do that, especially if there's insecurity or they've been ghosted multiple times, they're going to assume that that's ghosting. Now that's a them thing, not a you thing, but keep that in mind. Same is true for you, right? So for the person who is fearful of ghosting, have I created this communication schedule, rigid communication schedule, that I'm, anytime that person is acting outside of that schedule, I'm fearful of ghosting? Because I see this a lot. I see it a lot where it's not actually ghosting, it's the fear of ghosting. And then we start acting crazy, kind of like I did with Corey. So But for actual ghosting, we want to spot signs early and we're not taking it personally. Again, remember, ghosting is for someone who's emotionally immature, someone who can't have adult conversations or hard conversations. If you're looking for a life partner, you need to have hard fucking conversations. You need to talk about things that are the most vulnerable. Believe me, I am married and we've had to talk about things that are embarrassing, that are embarrassing. That's the only word I can think of. Like, oh, that are filled with, we feel with shame, right? Like one person can feel very shameful about. And we do that in a safe, trusting environment. So if you're noticing, so what does this look like, right? Say that you're dating someone and you're like 3 weeks in and you've had a hard day at work. And you're like, oh my gosh, I had the hardest day at work. And they're not kind of maybe a little bit open to having that conversation about your hard day at work. That might be a sign, right? If they avoid it or they dismiss it or they make it about themselves, that's a sign, right? Noticing if they kind of disappear for short amounts of times and come back. Now, that's different than I'm working and I'll get back to at the end of the day. That is, we communicate and then they fall off for 3-4 days and there's no rhyme or reason for that. Be aware of that, right? Be aware of the conversations you have. How did their last relationship end? Right? Have they been dating? How do those relationships end? These are conversations you can have. You don't have to get into all the details, but listen to how people talk about their ex-partners, right? She was crazy. She was insane. I was perfect. Normally, if we're using words like that, it's because you are emotionally mature and that person was reacting to your emotional immaturity and or you both had your own trauma bullshit that you had to deal with. Prioritize clear communication and boundaries up front. Just fucking do it. Here's the thing. I hear this with women all the time. What if I tell someone these clear boundaries and they don't like it? Well, guess what? That is your sign that they're not the person for you. Can we please stop worrying about the other person's feelings for a second? I personally loved when someone's like, hey, listen, I work Monday through Friday. I'm not really on my phone during that time. If you do text me and I don't text you back, I will definitely get to it at the end of the day. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Right? Clear communication. And having those conversations and being able to say like, look, hey, I know we're kind of getting to know each other. I want to just kind of talk about like what communication looks like, because I've been in relationships where people just text all day and then boom, they don't have time to keep that up. I've been in relationships where people don't have their phone. So I just want to know what that looks like for you. Yes, it's not like the sexiest conversation, but at least you'll know. And if they have a problem with it, you're going to figure out real fast if the person is emotionally mature or not. For breadcrumbing, look for consistent actions, not just words, right? Think about it again. Do you value someone who keeps their word? Do you value someone with integrity? Do you value someone that you can trust? Are these characteristics you want in someone as a partner? I sure hope so. I sure the fuck hope so. So, Deja Crew, love that. We have to always be thinking about that. If someone is just giving us words, what does that look like long term? You're never going to be able to rely on that person. You're going to create a lot of resentment over them and the relationship is just going to end anyway. So if this person is not showing deliberate action and keeping their word, now give grace to people, not too much, but have grace for situations, right? I have a funny story. So my husband and I were dating for about a month and a half before the first time we hooked up. And we had communicated pretty much, I would say, every other day and went on dates at least once during the week and one on the weekend. That was kind of like our schedule. And so he met up with me. We were actually at a resort. We had a pool party during the day and I just got a room because it was like a casino situation. And he comes, we have a great night and great morning. And then he leaves. And I don't hear from him for 3 days. And I'm like, what is happening? Did he just hook up? Did he just ghost me? Right. And lo and behold, his phone broke. And at the time you had to send your phone out and it took 3 days to get it. So this was, back in like 2014. And luckily for me, he's a mature individual and was able to say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I know how this looks, but this is what happened. And I think he even sent some receipts at the time. I'm like, no, look, like this is the email. I didn't ask for it, but he was able to have that conversation with me. And then we resumed as we resumed. So pay attention to actions versus just listening to words and Don't waste your time on people who don't match your energy and effort. Do you want me to say that again? Don't waste your time on people who don't match your energy or effort. We do this all of the time. Again, going back to Groundhog's Day and the common patterns that keep us stuck, we're trying to fix someone. We're trying to love them into loving us back. We're trying to give and give and give in hopes we get and get and get, but that's not how it works, right? Reciprocity is very important in relationships. And so I think, and this actually goes against a bit of like traditional values, because I personally think that, if one person is the one doing all the planning of the dates, then yes, that other person needs to take some responsibility for that. I see this in male-female relationships where the guy's constantly the one who is, scheduling the dates and doing the planning and paying for everything. And that's wonderful. However, there does need to be a sense of balance or effort. And effort might not be you planning the dates, but maybe it's something else, right? An area that he's not as comfortable in. So I'll give you an example. So I'm actually the planner. I'm the one that keeps our social calendar going, where my husband is the one who does more of the financial stuff, right? So I'm the social, I'm the cruise director and he's, the accountant. And that works for us. And I put a lot of effort into my position and he puts a lot of effort into his position. And that's kind of how our relationship works in different ways. So he will take out the trash, whereas I will clean the toilets. That's a big thing for us. He doesn't love cleaning toilets. I don't mind cleaning the toilets. So those are just, the effort is there. It may not be tit for tat, but the effort matches each other and the energy put it into the relationship. Now, as you get into longer relationships and you're more committed, you will see kind of this, someone has 30% to give, the other person can pick up that 70%. And then it goes the other person, and then it flips, right? Now that person only has 30% and the other person picks up 70%. We kind of do this like balancing act, this teeter tottering. We're never usually 50-50, but we can kind of pick up for the other when needed. And sometimes even having those conversations in more long-term committed relationships of saying like, I've had a really hard day. I literally only have 20% to give right now. And so that might mean like my husband might make dinner and do the dishes, which normally he makes dinner, I do the dishes, so he may do both or vice versa. Right. So last night he was making my creamies. He's so good to me. And I was thinking, okay, well, what does he need right now? And we have a chili sleep in our bed and you have to fill it up with water. So I was like, I'll fill up his chili sleep. Right. So I like balanced it out. Anyway. And then love bombing. Listen to your gut. I'm going to tell you that right now. If it feels too good to be true, if he's your knight in shining armor or your queen or your perfect girl, or they tell you that, listen to your gut. Listen to your gut. Whatever causes tension needs attention. So if you got tension going on, maybe pay attention to it. Slow things down and evaluate the behavior. Okay. Does this feel too much? Or does this feel like a fairy tale? Life is not a fucking fairy tale. Life is life. And love and true, healthy love, well, yes, there can be a spark and this wonderful chemistry. Again, we think about letting the air out of the balloon slowly rather than just blowing it up and letting it go. So if your relationship feels like a balloon that you literally just blew up and let go and it's just bouncing off the walls, reevaluate that. And again, if it feels too good to be true, you probably have said this words to your friends. It is. It is. We are not in the days of our grandparents where we meet and fall in love and get married 2 weeks later. But even them, your grandparents probably had a bunch of issues that they just worked through, right? Yes, the outcome, the end result is them being together for 75 years, but that was a different age. We now need to pay attention to the too good to be trueness, especially in the culture of fast dating as we have now, right? This kind of, sky's the limit. People are limitless in regards to how many people we are exposed to each day that could be potential partners. And so if it's too good to be true, trust your gut. So I hope this episode is helpful for you to kind of navigate the worlds of breadcrumbing, ghosting, and love bombing, giving you practical skills and tools to kind of dissect that this is happening, but also be careful. We are very label, because it's funny. In relationships, we're labelless right now, right? People don't want labels, but we label people. We label the shit out of people most of the time incorrectly. We use words like love bombing, ghosting, narcissist, gaslighting. We put all these labels on people. And we do that in an effort to not be vulnerable. So if they're the problem, then we're fine. And a part of dating deja vu is it might be deja vu, but it might be you, right? So be careful of the stories you're making up about people. And for all of the three, ghosting, breadcrumbing, and love bombing, think about the facts versus the fantasy or the fears. So that's kind of what I talked about, but I want to elaborate on that because this is something I talk about with my dating clients often. When we have a belief, okay, I'm getting ghosted, focus on the facts. I had a client recently say like his inner critic, which he calls Sir, was telling him that the girl he's dating isn't interested in him because that's what's happened to him in his life and she was going to ghost him. I said, okay, well, what are the facts? He's like, well, she said she enjoyed the date. We've communicated and she answers my texts anytime, throughout the day. We have a second date this weekend and she said she was excited for the date. Those are the facts. Well, what are the fears? She's going to leave me like everyone else, right? Any sort of difference in communication means she doesn't want me, right? And then what are the fantasies? The fantasies are we talk every single day. She validates me every day. She tells me how great I am and so on. Know the difference between those three things. Focus on the facts. This goes for ghosting, love bombing, and breadcrumbing. And be careful of the fantasies of the fears. Now with ghosting, it's a little bit harder, but if it's gradually happening, we can focus on the facts. Or if it's not happening, we think it is happening, we can still focus on the facts and know our fears. But with breadcrumbing and love bombing, it definitely is helpful to focus on the facts. Then also, what are your fantasies that you're creating? Because sometimes we'll create fantasies about how it should be. This could be true for ghosting and communication. We could be creating fantasy of how it should be. And then because it's not, we assume we're ghosted. So the fantasy of what it should be, what I'm thinking it should be, and just being very aware of that, because that's, again, a fairy tale. And the fears, right? And those are your own insecurities. They don't like me. I'm not good enough. They think I'm a bit crazy. That thing I said was stupid. No, those are all your own fears. Be careful of them. So only focus on the facts. So that is one of my favorite things to teach my clients. So for all of these things, you can see, even talking about each individual one, how we are focusing on the facts. And your gut reaction sometimes that can trick you. So even then, if we're having a gut reaction, come back to the facts, right? What's actually happening? And be careful. A fact is something that has happened or has not happened. It's not a feeling. It's not a perception. It's actually happened. So good. Well, I hope you guys found this information helpful. As always, if you like this, please make sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss our episodes. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel at Dating Deja Vu. If you want some behind the scenes tips and some fun, give us a follow on Instagram at Dating Deja Vu. And if you're feeling generous, please give us a 5-star rating and review. The more reviews we have, the more followers we have, the more people that are exposed to our content. The more people exposed to this content, the more likely that you will interact with someone who is educated on all of these things, therefore presenting healthier for a potential partner for you. So see, this actually is for you. So again, it might be deja vu, boo, but it also might be you. Talk to you soon.